Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson, and I am joined, as always, on the other line by, maybe for the last time this season, it's Anthony Chang, our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. Anthony, what's going on?
Have we lost faith, David? Is that what I
kind of
hear?
Lost faith. Well, we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk all about it. Not a great night for the Heat on Tuesday night. We are recording this moments after the Bulls rallied. What was 19 down? I think it was
19 down. Yeah.
In the second half, I think, or it was a big comeback. DeMar DeRozan went off in Toronto. Fun little subplot. Or kind of
Zach LaVine
there.
39
Zach
points.
LaVine, really went off. So now they are getting ready to head down to Miami. We'll see if their flights can get in with all this weather right now.
That's a good point, actually.
We've got it all comes down to this. Friday night, Heat will host the Bulls with both teams' season on the line. As you were saying right before we started recording, you're not prepared for this because you were all ready for the Raptors to win. And as I said, it kind of just speaks to what these play-ins are. It's a lot of randomness. You texted me during the game, a lot of mid basketball in these play-in games. That Laker game, kind of, I think, was like the epitome of a play-in game. They kind of should be playing these games in Dayton, it feels like. Yeah, I mean, it's with the problem. We talked about this over and over again, that this Heat team was just as likely to lose two kind of inexplicable games in a play-in as they were to go on a run. And now, I mean, we're halfway to that. I think the way the Heat played on Tuesday night is certainly not encouraging. Where should we start? I guess we'll start with what happened Tuesday night, and then we'll dive into a little bit of a Bulls preview and just kind of the whole idea of the play-in. Just kind of an awful performance from the Heat on Tuesday. I don't even know where Kyle Lowry was great. Everyone else was not.
Yeah. I mean,
Tyler Hero had a good run in the second half, but for the most part, nothing.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Yes, so many of the Heat's issues, season-long issues, made an appearance in that game. In the beginning, it was shooting. I think they started 3 of 15 from three. They kind of made a few threes thanks to Kyle Lowry in the second half. Their defense was not good in the first half, early on especially. I think they had 65. The Hawks had 65 first half points. Defense has been a problem, like we've discussed here, since the All-Star break. But really, the thing that killed them, and if you're listening to this podcast, you should know this by now, was the offensive rebounds, the second chance points.
That was definitely the storyline coming out of the game.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, that was the game. The Heat were outscored 26-6 in second chance points. The Heat lost by 11. So it pretty much comes down to that, if you want to make it that simple. And I think we've discussed this too last month or so. The Heat have been a really good, I know people say they're small, they're not athletic. They've been a good defensive rebounding team for most of the year.
Yeah.
I think they still finished sixth in defensive rebounding percentage. I think entering the All-Star break, they were fifth or fourth, which is elite in that department. But the past, I think since the break or the last month or two, they've basically been like 15th, 16th in defensive rebounding, which is not terrible, but there's been slippage.
Literally middle of the
There's
pack.
been slippage. And Atlanta, I think since the break, like Quinn Snyder, since he got there, they've been the best offensive rebounding team in that time. So put those two things together, Clint Capella is a great rebounder.
Yeah.
He had 21 rebounds, 8 offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
The Hawks
shoot a
were
lot
just
of threes.
crashing.
Those are good offensive rebound opportunity shots.
Yeah, they were just, and you look at you watch the game again. Like I was watching it this morning, and the Hawks were sending 2-3 guys to the offensive glass every time. And, they were getting the switch, the Bam on the perimeter. And then near the basket was Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, like Tyler Hero. And Clint Capella and DeAndre Hunter crashing the glass. Like, who do you think is going to come up with the offensive rebound, right? So it was a really good strategy by Atlanta. I'm sure we'll try to, the Bulls might try something similar. That was pretty much the difference in the game on Tuesday night. I was rewatching the game this morning, and you kind of see what the Hawks were trying to do. They would get Bam out into, on the switch in the perimeter, and then by the basket it was like, Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero, and Max Strus, and the Hawks had Clint Capella and down there crashing the glass. And it's like, who do you think is going to come down with the offensive rebound? It's not that not that hard to figure out. So, the Hawks had a good game plan. Even with like some of their pick and roll coverages of just kind of the way they matched up with the Heat wanted to do offensively was pretty smart. So I think Quinn Snyder did a good job. And, the Bulls, I'm sure, will look at that game. They don't have the same personnel as Atlanta, but they will look at that game and see what Atlanta did, and they'll try to replicate some of that stuff.
Yeah, the Bulls do not shoot a lot of threes, so
no,
they cannot kind of do the Trey, like playing a million feet away from the basket thing in the same way. But
they're also a bad offense. They're not a great offensive rebounding team. I think they're the third worst offensive rebounding percentage in the NBA. So if Heat fans want any good news, they probably won't have to watch another opponent get 22 offensive rebounds again against the Heat.
Yeah. Well, to me, the worst sign is just that like the stars kind of didn't show up. Jimmy was aggressive, but missed a lot of shots. And Bam was, we've talked about it, he was incredible in the first 2/3 of the season, and since the All-Star break, he's kind of gone back to the Bam that frustrates people, and we saw that again last night. So that is the bigger concern for me, is just this team has had flaws, as we've said all year long, but for the most part, the stars have covered it up. Not covered it up, but the team finished a couple games over 500, basically because of Bam and Jimmy. And if it was just a one-game aberration, then they should be able to beat the Bulls tomorrow. But we have seen a lot of times, as we said, like they get in these funks and losses string together, and it takes them a couple of games to get out of it. And obviously, they have no time left for that.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy and Bam need to show up. That's the bottom line.
Yeah,
he can't win. I mean,
if they show up, I mean, and maybe they won't win even if they show up, because Zach LaVine can score 40 and
but have any
Mark Rose
chance
can score 30.
Right.
If they show up, the Heat should win. Doesn't mean they will win, but if they don't show up, they got no chance.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy was aggressive. He took 19 shots, went to the free throw line 11 times.
Mm-hmm.
He just was really inefficient. He was 6 of 19. His least efficient performance. A lot of shots
around the rim.
Yeah,
those mid-range shots. Yeah,
least efficient performance in over 3 months. I think since like January 2nd or something like that. He's been so efficient since the break, shooting 61% from the field, and picked a bad time to really have a dud. And like you said, he missed a lot of shots at the rim that he normally makes.
Mm-hmm.
Bam too. Bam missed some bunnies as well. And I know Atlanta did a good job of really like loading up in the paint, putting more, length around those guys, putting two guys whenever they got the ball like around the basket. So that made an impact. But there were just some that you're like, they make those most of the time.
Yeah.
And a few of those go down, and the game might be different even with all the offensive rebounds. So I would expect Jimmy and Bam to play better on Friday. I know Bam specifically, this has kind of been a continuation.
Yeah, that's really, I guess, the bigger
concerning
concern,
part.
right? Like Jimmy, you could probably count on
one
hand the number of times he's had two like mediocre games back to back all year. It probably is not even more than like 2 or 3 instances of that. But Bam, like you said, like the problem is they can't afford both of them to no show, and they kind of both did. Kyle Lowry, and that's obviously the big positive out of the night. I mean, for the guy who's kind of been the punching bag in a lot of Heat fans' mind, like he was the one guy who tried to get him into the playoffs last night.
If it wasn't for him, that would have been like a 25-point loss.
Yeah.
30-point loss.
Yeah, I mean, it was headed toward that at the end of the first half, basically. And
down by 24. Yeah.
And he hit a bunch of shots down the stretch to make it competitive going into the second half. And obviously they made it sort of close at points in the second half. But I mean, if he plays like that, it changes a lot. I mean, again, we're talking about a team that even if they win, they're going to play the Bucks. Like, it's really
which
hard
we should discuss.
It's hard to envision this season going much more than another 2 weeks in the best case scenario. But man, if like they had gotten that Kyle Lowry, like it's the whole, in some ways, the story of the Heat season. And again, this is just the story of mediocre teams. It's just like nothing comes together all at once, right? The defense was so good in the first half, the offense was terrible, and then eventually the offense starts going, but the defense slips. And Jimmy, Bam was obviously an all-star in the first half. and Jimmy was in and out of the lineup. And then in the second half, after the All-Star break, Jimmy's one of the best players in the league, and Bam regresses. And now now Kyle's finally playing his best ball, at least for one night, and the rest of the roster didn't show up. That's what happens though when you're a mediocre team, is inconsistent across the board.
Yeah, and also like it's like we've been saying, I still don't know what the Heat do really well.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They have Jimmy Butler.
Exactly, that's pretty much it. Yeah. If you ask me what's the formula to beat the Bulls, like how they're going to beat the Bulls, I don't know. They could have a really big scoring night, or they could just shut them down defensively. I wouldn't be surprised either way at this point. But yeah, I think the one consistent is Jimmy Butler, and then second is Bam, having Bam as a kind of anchor your defense. And, he should be able to, the Bulls playing a drop, right? So that's good for Bam and Tyler Hero and their pick and roll, theoretically. So this should be a Bam and Tyler game. They should have, if the Heat are going to win, I think those two guys would have pretty big nights. But again, I don't know what to expect. I never know what to expect entering a game with the Heat this season, just because they're so inconsistent and they really don't have an identity at this point.
Yeah. I mean, they're in some ways it makes them the perfect play-in team, as we discussed. Like these play-in teams, you watch them all, and it's like they have like two good players. Yeah, even the Lakers, who like people are now like, could they make a run to the finals out of the 7 seed? Like they have Bam, or they have LeBron and Anthony Davis, and then a bunch of role players who, probably better role players than the Heat has, but like guys who can play really well on a given night and guys who don't play very well on a given night. And I mean, we just watched the Bulls Raptors game. You saw the Raptors were incredible in the first half and then terrible. Like it's from half to half, quarter to quarter, these teams. And it makes the Heat the team that is just unpredictable, and every game is a toss up. Like that's what all these play-in teams are, right? They're all 500 teams basically, who can look incredible on a given night. The Heat and the Lakers, as a 7 seed in each conference, make kind of a natural comparison point, both because of where they stand. Obviously, they played in the finals not that long ago with basically the same cores, at least the same stars on those teams. And the Lakers had some runs this year where they looked incredible. They also started 2-10. The Heat had probably not the same. They didn't have the same highs as the Lakers or the same lows necessarily, but like same thing where you look at, they have Jimmy Butler and they
should be better,
string together wins. They should be better. Yeah. And the Lakers obviously won probably the worst basketball game, probably the worst like playoff basketball game. I'm doing air quotes for those listening. Probably the worst playoff basketball game I've ever watched last night. The Heat lost a game and now they're down to their last life. That's just what the play-in is, right? Like, one day maybe one of these play-in teams is going to go on a run. Maybe the Lakers will do it because they have LeBron James, but like ultimately these play-in teams these are fun games for a week, to kill time for a week, and then they get run over in the first round for a reason.
Yeah, there's a reason why for the first 2 years the 8 teams that have advanced out of the play-in have all lost in the first round, and they really haven't been long series.
I was going to say, what's the longest series of those? Have any of them?
I might be like 6, I think. I don't know.
I can't remember. Was New Orleans, were they a play-in team last year? Was that a 2-7 series?
I know when the East it was Atlanta.
Or Minnesota.
In the East it was Atlanta, and who did Boston play in the first round? I forget. But the point is
they swept them.
They swept them, right? And then
Brooklyn was the team. They were the scary.
Right, they were the scary team, just like the Heat were. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to go back to the Bulls, they do. I think the Heat match up better with Chicago than they do Toronto. So if I'm the Heat, I think I'm pretty happy with this result. But the Bulls do enter with a little bit of an advantage, I think, because they have an identity. They have the number 1 defense in the NBA. It's a weird team because the way they're built, you're like, they're a good offensive team. They can't play defense. They have the number 1 defense in the NBA after the All-Star break, the 3rd best defense in the NBA all season. And after the break, they're 14-9 with the 3rd best net rating behind the Celtics, I think, and Golden State. They've been good. Their offense is 15, so they're average, but they have an average offense and elite defense. So they've been playing good basketball lately, compared to the Heat, who really have not been playing good basketball on either end since the break. Plus, you throw in the fact that the Bulls are 3-0 against the Heat this season.
How much does that, like, do you buy in? I can't remember those matchups, like, kind of games we can learn anything from, or is that just throw it out?
I have to go through each one again because, like I said earlier in the podcast, I was really preparing for the
Raptors. You got it. You're fine.
But yeah, I'm a little behind now. But I mean, the first game was the season opener, where like that was like one of the first disappointing loss because you're like, they enter the season with with high hopes. They're playing a Bulls team that isn't supposed to be great, and they lose by 8 points at home. But the last game they played was just a few weeks ago. When was it? In March 18th, so less than a month ago in Chicago. The Heat lost by 14, and the Bulls were playing on the second night of a back-to-back. So there's something there that bothers the Heat, and I think DeMar's had some big games against Miami, right? And the Bulls' defense is really good at kind of limiting 3-point shots. There's so many defenses, including the Heat's, that kind of make teams shoot threes. But the Bulls stay home on the 3-point shooters, and they kind of make teams. I think they force teams to the most long twos in the NBA. So that's kind of their formula. So yeah, I mean, the Heat. This is not going to be an easy one. Obviously, I don't think anything's easy for the Heat at this point. But
yeah, exactly.
The Bulls have the best defense in the NBA for the last 2 months, and to me, that's an edge. They have the edge because they have a clear vision of what they need to do to win the game.
Yeah, I was gonna originally set aside the second half of this episode to actually like break down the matchup, but I don't even know.
Sorry about that.
Like, I don't even know if that. No, I mean, I don't even know if that's important because, like we said, it's just random when these like it's a 1-game series. It is 2 mediocre teams, right? 2 roughly 500 teams who it's gonna come down to. It's about who makes shots, Anthony. I don't know if you know, but basketball it's a make or miss league. And that, I mean, in a 1-game series, it literally is because bad teams beat good teams all the time. And especially like 2 average teams, like it basically will come down to who hits their tough shots and which stars probably show up. These are 2 teams that are kind of very like star driven in some ways, right?
It's a star driven league and a make or miss league. Yeah.
But especially these teams, like the Heat's role players are inconsistent. The Bulls role players, like
Alex Caruso and Pat Bev.
I mean, you got Caruso and Pat Bev, kind of different. I mean, the Heat has like Hero, very different types of role players, but both teams kind of go as their stars go because Levine and DeRozan are such ball dominant guys, and then in the Heat's case, Jimmy is such a ball dominant guy, especially come playoff time. But just largely, I think, you said you want to talk about it, just the fact that even if they win, they're getting to Milwaukee.
Yeah, we should close on that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's where we got to finish. The play-in is, I looked it up. Last year, Minnesota and New Orleans were play-in teams. Those series went 6. The Lakers went 6 a couple years. Remember, they played the Warriors, and that was the original dangerous play-in team. They ended up losing to Phoenix in 6. So there have been a couple series that have gone 6. I don't think any have gone 7 yet. None of the East ones definitely have. So 6 is the longest they go. Usually they're much shorter, especially in the Eastern Conference. They've kind of been lately when the East has been really top heavy. Definitely have seen those games those series be pretty quick work. I think a lot of Heat fans are wondering, are the Heat even going to show up on Friday, right? How much value is there in making the playoffs? It feels like no matter what happens Friday, like I said, this season's not going to go longer than another 10 days or whatever, probably. Right. And they're kind of wind up in the same place no matter what at the end of all this, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously
they're gonna obviously the Heat want to make the playoffs.
They're not gonna throw the game.
No, I know.
They're gonna try to win it. I don't think social media is not a good barometer of real society, but I don't think I have one person like that's I've seen on Twitter a Heat
that's
fan
like hyped for this game.
No, that wants the Heat to win. Like everybody
I know.
wants the Heat to lose and just to put fans out of their misery and just kind of maybe see if they can get a 0.5% chance to get the number one pick.
Or the 0.56 chance at Scoot Henderson.
Yeah, I mean, so a win, yeah, it'll get them into the playoffs. I don't think fans are going to be like celebrating over a win.
No, definitely
fans are going to be upset like that they have to deal with this for another week or so.
It's going to be the Alonzo Mourning GIF, right? Yeah, well,
I guess we'll have to live this out for another week. But when it comes to like Heat players, they're going to obviously try to win the game. I think the question is mentally, like, what's like, is there that motivation they would normally have in this type of setting when they kind of they're coming off a really disappointing loss?
Well, and if things go sideways quickly, right? That's what I worry more about is if this team goes down like they did against Atlanta. Obviously in the NBA, those 20-point comebacks happen all the time now. We just saw 19-point comeback tonight.
Yeah.
I worry about what this is going to look like if the Heat get down early. Like, is it 1-2-3 Cancun at that point?
Yeah, and like the fact that like in the
especially
back of
with
their
all
heads,
this rain, I got to get out of Miami.
In the back of their heads, they know, okay, we win this, we have to fly to Milwaukee the next day, play the Bucks,
play Giannis,
and deal with that. So like, there is like a mental aspect of all this.
Obviously
right?
they want to win, but there's levels to wanting to win, right?
Right.
Like, it's natural. We see guys try a lot harder in Game 7 of the NBA Finals than they do in Game 1 of the regular season, and then they do in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. And this game sits somewhere between like Game 7 of a first-round series and Game 1 of the regular season, right? Like, the motivation factor is hard to judge because it is a must-win game in the sense that you must win to keep your season alive, but it's not
a great reward.
No, it's not you win and you're in the NBA Finals. It's you win and, like you said, you fly to Milwaukee the next day. An underrated city, especially in the springtime.
I like Milwaukee.
I love Milwaukee.
I'm okay.
All they care about is beer and ice cream.
I'm good with Milwaukee. Yeah, I'm happy if that's what it ends up being. But and also like I think there's the part that I think if the Bulls win on Friday, it's like I think Bulls fans will be happy, right? Like that's a success for them.
Bulls, it's a bigger deal. They're the 10 seed. They get in the playoffs.
It's like they see that as an accomplishment. So I think there is motivation on their end.
And they've got momentum, right? They do it like
they're coming off a win.
But they have momentum.
And for the Heat, you win Friday, like we said, and they don't care, but fans are going to be happy. And even if they win, like this season is still going to be considered a big disappointment if they lose in the first round to Milwaukee. So there's that part too. So I think
if the Bulls win, Zach LaVine is talking trash to the Heat crowd, right? If the Heat wins, like Jimmy Butler gives Udonis Haslem a handshake, and they get on a plane to Milwaukee.
Yeah. Right. It's just everything's relative and relative to expectations this season. This is not where the Heat want it to be. If they win, entering the playoffs as the East number 8 seed facing the Bucks in the first round. This was supposed to be an Eastern Conference final series for the Heat, right? So, I mean, I think I'm going to say this cliche, and this is the way every playing game has been, but I feel like it's 50-50 at this point.
It is.
Like the Heat, I wouldn't be surprised by any outcome, not only because the Heat are inconsistent and kind of unpredictable, but because that's just the nature of the playing tournament and these like, average teams pretty much.
Yeah.
If the Bulls win behind a great defense performance, I would not be shocked. If the Heat win because Jimmy Butler scores 35 on 12 field goal attempts and 20 of 25 shooting at the foul line, I wouldn't be surprised. It's just
that'd be a lot of misses for him. I'd be a little surprised.
That's true. What is that for? It's like 80% from the line. That's not bad. 80%.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I stand at this point. I'm gonna pack my bag to go to Milwaukee on Saturday, go cover Friday's game, and then I guess see what happens. See if I'm gonna get in a plane this weekend.
Going back really quickly to what we were just talking about with the motivation factor. Obviously the reason you would want to win this series is if you believe that the reason you want to win the play-in game, obviously one, because you want to win and because you want to get into the playoffs. But the bigger reason is you still believe that this team could go on a run. Do you think the Heat believes this team can actually, like, if they get to Milwaukee, upset Milwaukee and go on a run there. Obviously, they're not going to say they don't, but like, just, I don't know. This does not seem like a team that really believes in it itself right now.
I think there are some people in that building that believe that they still can put it together, but I have to think that there are some others that, I mean, they have to see it, right? Like, bad loss after bad loss, disappointing performance.
If they believe they're one win away from all of a sudden, like, that's a 7-game series with Milwaukee, like, they truly believe they can beat anyone on any given night, they're going to be motivated, but not, like, it's going to be hard.
I think even before all this and before this season, the feeling I got was the Heat really respected Milwaukee, obviously, and they thought that they were probably the best team in the East.
Yeah, I mean, last time they lost, 2 years ago they got embarrassed by Milwaukee in the first round of the playoffs.
And Milwaukee, I think, is better now.
Yeah.
And they have Goran Dragic and Jay Crowder, two guys that helped the Heat beat the Bucks, are now on the Bucks roster and really not even in the rotation for them.
Mm-hmm.
The Bucks are really, really good.
Yeah.
I think Chris Middleton is healthy, actually. So, yeah, that's going to be the fact that the Bucks have had a week off, and the Heat, if they win Friday, would be playing game 1 of that series like 36 hours later. Yeah, I mean, you never know what can happen, right? But that'd be a pretty historic.
It would be, because if someone makes a run out of the play-in, the first time it happens, it'll be history. Yeah.
And even 8 versus 1, I know it's happened a few times where you go like Golden State over Dallas that year with Baron Davis, or
I think that's the last time though, right?
Yeah, I guess who else? Like the Knicks made the finals.
Yeah, the Knicks.
I think
that was a lockout year.
Lockout year. Just doesn't happen often.
Yeah, no.
So I think most realistic people would say, okay, you win Friday, your season's probably not lasting more than like 2 weeks at most.
And I assume. I mean, obviously, if they go on a run again, like, it changes the way they're thinking. But losing tomorrow versus losing in 5 games to Milwaukee, I can't imagine is going to change. Well, one, probably the way the Heat feel about their season, and two, just like what this front office is going to do in the summer.
No, it's not going to change that.
It's just it's 2 extra
weeks of work.
2 extra weeks of work and two more gates, right? You get to sell some hot dogs.
It's funny. Boston Outlet sent a reporter to the Hawks Heat game on Tuesday, and he interviewed Heat players at shoot around, like preparing to write this story of Heat Celtics in the first round. I spoke with him after the game, and he's like, everyone in Boston thought it was going to be Heat Celtics. Like, they just assumed. Boston fans, I think we've seen it, like Bill Simmons and others, like they were scared of the Heat, of facing the Heat in the first round, and it ends up being Boston Atlanta. I think outsiders still view this team as like a threat.
Yeah, right? I mean, they were like they're a 5-point favorite. Like, the teams are just like, but it's all year. What the Heat, I think, have like the worst record in the league against the spread.
It's a spread. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, like the outside perception, and it's funny because the cocky Heat fan is like a thing, right? And just like,
but not anymore.
It's been the exact. But that's the other thing with Heat fans. There's no middle ground. It's either cocky or like, I want to jump off the Rickenbacker.
Right.
No in between.
I just feel like, for those who haven't watched the team, or like they still think they can be the team from last season because they have a pretty similar roster.
Yeah.
But for those of us who have watched the team and look at the numbers, this team is flawed. It just is not the same team at all on either end. And I think for the first half of the year, we were all waiting for them to kind of replicate, like make it work or kind of get it to click. But at this point, 83 games into the season, they just are who they are at this point. And whether they win Friday or not, that doesn't change that.
To use a word you used to me in a text earlier, they are mid.
Well, I said that with the play-in tournament, but yes, the Heat are. I mean, you could argue. I think the Heat's roster is better than should be better than what they are right now.
Yeah.
Right? But if you look at the numbers, they're below mid. Again, they have the worst net rating out of any of the 20 teams who qualified for the postseason. So, and there's something to be said about that. I know like Jimmy Jimmy Butler's kind of turned it up a notch lately, but they still were 12-11 after the break with him shooting 61% from the field. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That just shows you kind of all the issues that have kind of plagued them all year. It's not just one or two, it's a lot.
Well, I think either way, we're getting ready for a long off season in Miami, long, potentially busy off season. We just don't know whether it will start this weekend or 2 weeks from now. But either way, we will be back next week, either to eulogize this Heat season more so than we already have. And we've kind of done it, I think, pretty extensively over the last half hour here, or to talk about a Milwaukee series. And I don't know, maybe Miami will be up 2-1 by the time. I guess it wouldn't be that deep into the series.
Maybe
it'll be 1-1. Maybe it'll be 1-1, and all of a sudden the cocky Heat fan will be back. And
I mean, that's the thing.
Here's the thing: if the Heat wins one in Milwaukee,
one game,
if they win their next two, all of a sudden it's like Jimmy Butler. Don't want to play him in a playoff series.
Eric Spoelstra always says, and he's right. I mean, the conversation changes fast in this league, especially in the playoffs. It just takes one win, one huge. Do I think the Heat are going to win 4 times against the Bucks? No, but could the Heat win once in Milwaukee because of a great, like this is like the play-in. It's a 1-game thing. Like, can the Heat win once in Milwaukee to put a scare into the Bucks and like start the whole cocky Heat fan thing again? Yeah, that could happen, and I guess that would be fun. If we get at least a little taste of that before the year's over.
Yeah, I mean, if they get to if they get to round 1, they could make that a 6-game series. Why not?
And then Cleveland, New York in the second round, winnable series.
Yeah, winnable series. Then Boston, and they've been scared of the Heat all year.
I mean, maybe they can make the finals. Let's see.
When you think about it, they're really only like 5 wins away, because again, New York, they're going to beat New York in round 2. They're really only 5 wins away from being like right back in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, because we know Heat Boston, that's a 7-game series. They're kind of 6 wins away from the finals right now.
You say so, David. Let's just get this one win on Friday, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah. All right, you got anything else, or should we wrap this up?
Panthers,
yeah, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, we haven't done the Panthers minute in a while.
No, we haven't. They haven't been worth it most of this year, but
they're playing. I mean, their best.
You and Alex, you get your Alex Lyon jersey yet?
Not yet, but what a story!
I know it is a crazy story.
It's a great story.
Yeah,
where did he come from?
He was just bouncing around the minors. Like, he's been like a third goalie on NHL teams for like the last 8 years or whatever, 5-6 years. Was in Carolina last year. Actually won the Calder Cup, which is like the American Hockey League.
Okay.
So he was the minor league champion goalie last year in Carolina's organization. So he was like kind of one of the top third goalies bouncing around, like the guy who's going to be your minor league goalie. And then if something happens, he gets called up.
Question is,
he's going to get an NHL contract this offseason, though, so good for him.
He should, definitely.
Yeah, he'll be a backup somewhere. Yeah.
Is Tkachuk the best professional athlete in South Florida sports?
Between him and Jimmy, right?
Yeah, I guess
Tyreek. It might be Tyreek, honestly. Tyreek is really, really good. But Tkachuk, I mean, I think he's going to be runner-up for MVP.
I mean, is he the second best player in the sport?
I'm not quite sure about that, but I think he's going to be runner-up for MVP.
I mean, it's those 3 pretty much: Jimmy, Tkachuk, and Tyreek. Probably.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone else even close. Luis Arias.
Luis Arias, yeah. Sandy,
I guess. Although he's had a rough start, yeah, so it's hard to say him right now. But yeah, I mean, Tkachuk is awesome. He's been, I mean, it's the best. Like, best success story of a guy coming to South Florida since LeBron. I guess Jimmy. The year one with Jimmy, they did go to the finals technically.
Yeah, it's crazy how much
it just took like 18 months to get there because of
it didn't feel like 1 season, it felt like 3 seasons.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just crazy how the Panthers like really won that trade. Like,
I know.
Clear cut won that trade, and they still like are not as good as last year.
Jonathan Huberdeau is going to have the biggest drop off ever in points in an NHL season.
Wow.
Went from like 115, I want to say he had last year, and he's going to finish with like 60 this year.
Wow. That's insane. No, I mean, that was a great...
Flames are going to fire their coach, and has not worked out for them. But
that was a great move.
It is crazy. I mean, it is like for all the, I get like the people who like are frustrated by Paul Maurice, and he has no track record of playoff success. Basically, went to the finals once for a guy who's coached like the third or fourth most games in NHL history. They made excuses all year about the injuries and stuff, and like kind of get it. Like,
yeah,
Barkov missed 10 games, Bennett's missed 15 games, and we're in cap hell too, where they've got like $8 million still owed to Keith Yandle this year. Like that's a big part of why we're not that good this year. Is they're like one defenseman short because Keith Yandle's eating up a big chunk of the cap.
There's so many parallels between the Heat and the Panther season, just up until like the last month, pretty much.
I know, like we talked about
up until then
over and over again on this show, and then the Panthers figured it out, and the Heat never did.
Yeah, well, there's still time for the Heat. We'll see.
Yeah, 6 wins away from the finals.
Like you said, exactly. That should be the name of this episode.
Do you think they got cross off the wins, right? Like what, 16 wins to win the championship? Did the Heat have that with like 17 and they're just waiting to like check off that first one?
I mean, they usually do have that, but I'm guessing they'll have it somewhere. But it's been a while since the Heat entered the playoffs. Like, I'm not saying they can't win in the series, right? Like, obviously it's not impossible, but that there's so little hope, right?
Yeah.
Like, so little people. Like, who is going to predict the Heat win in that series? Even when the Heat faced the 76ers, when those final Dwayne Wade years, like in 2000.
Yeah, they still had Dwayne Wade.
17,
right?
18. Like, it was still like, could they upset the young Sixers, like Ben Simmons and Embiid, who I think had maybe never been to the playoffs at that point, or maybe once before, and they really hadn't done anything yet. Could they help? There was always that question, but like, I don't remember the last time the Heat entered a playoff series, first round especially. This big of an underdog if they do get there.
Yeah, don't pick us, right?
That's a slogan, right? Yeah, exactly. Don't pick us.
All right. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chang. He will be out at how do you pronounce it? Kaseya Arena on
Kaseya Center.
The Kaseya Center, sorry. Kaseya Center on Friday. You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. We'll be back next week to talk about whatever the heck happens this weekend. Either way, it'll be eventful. So
either I'll be in Milwaukee or I'll be in Cancun. One of the two.
There you go. 1, 2, 3, Milwaukee. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.